At 8:13, the services for Ivana Trump today won't be a funeral. They are calling it a celebration of life instead.
Ivana's life, of course, a huge impact on her husband of 15 years, Donald Trump, with whom they have 3 children. In fact, there's talk that she was actually so integral to making his career and his future. Washington Post reporter Paul Farhi put it this way: without Ivana Trump, there would be no Donald Trump. Sounds a little extreme, right? So let's find out exactly what he means.
All right, Paul, thanks for being here. So explain that headline to us. What did you mean?
Well, yes. In fact, she is the one who named him the Donald, a nickname that stuck, and helped propel him really to the fame that set him up to run for the White House. Without Ivana, there really wouldn't be the same myth, the same legend, the same kind of character that we know as Donald Trump. She was part of the story in the late 80s and early 90s that was so dramatic in New York City, in New York City society, and really put Donald Trump on the map.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, she was so very savvy. So much has been written about how they were both incredibly driven. They came from very hard-charging, demanding fathers. Back in the 80s, Trump was a media-loving developer of big city buildings, Atlantic City casinos. So did he actually need Ivana to kind of help make him and propel him on that track?
Yes, she did, because they were a couple, they were a pair. Their story was part of the legend of Trump. Their divorce was really the height of Donald Trump's fame in the early 90s. He had written The Art of the Deal, which kind of had landed him on the map. But to sustain that story, there was this drama about his relationship with this glamorous Eastern European figure, Ivana, who was very press smart, spoke often to the press, and she was part of the glamour around him. When they got divorced, this was the biggest story in New York City. The tabloids had dueling headlines about what was going on. Marla Maples entered the picture in an affair with Donald Trump. It was a spectacular story. This, of course, shielded Donald Trump from the real story that was going on, which was the collapse of his business empire. The tabloids were so focused on the relationship between Donald, Ivana, and Marla Maples that they really didn't focus on what was happening with Trump's business. But without The Art of the Deal, without Ivana, we wouldn't know Donald Trump as a public figure. There was one other element, I think, in his career that made him what he is today, and that was The Apprentice. But that came in about 2004, some 10, 15 years after his initial fame.
All right.
But Ivana was the origin.
Okay, so briefly, let's take a look at 2 other things that you say helped make Donald Trump. First, his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal. Do we know if Ivana was involved in that book deal? Because she was involved in some of his businesses.
She really was not involved in writing that book. That book was ghostwritten by a fellow named Tony Schwartz, a journalist. It became a surprise bestseller. Most people outside New York City had not heard of Trump at that point. But she was involved in his businesses, unlike his next 2 wives, Marla Maples and First Lady Melania Trump. She actually was involved in redecorating the Plaza Hotel, in running some of the business operations in Atlantic City. He criticized her later on for her business savvy, kind of blamed her for some of the things that went wrong.
I mean, we've certainly seen that behavior that has continued on today, deflecting blame, pushing away from himself, and not taking the accountability for that. Talk about how, we have just less than a minute left here, how this laid the groundwork for his successful run for the White House.
Well, the collapse of his businesses should have been the end of Donald Trump. It was not. He maintained some amount of cash flow, some kind of viability throughout the 90s. But it was long after his divorce from Ivana when Mark Burnett, the producer, signed him up to be on The Apprentice. And The Apprentice projected a personality, projected a person that America really, really liked, which is this tough CEO type. And if you project forward from the debut and the 10-year-plus run of The Apprentice to his political campaign, that's the way voters perceived him, as this tough, no-nonsense CEO who could run a company who would also, they assumed, be able to run a country. And at that point, Trump really became a figure that was of national importance.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but it was an interesting conversation. Paul Farhi of the Washington Post, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, really trying to put some of that together, how Ivana so helped to shape Donald Trump back then and how that continued forward into this time.